This video was made because there's been a lot of talk about World War III lately, and people have been asking what would a modern-day World War III actually look like? Would it even be called World War III? How does it start, and how does it end? Now, you can ask these questions about any number of hypothetical conflicts, but I think the global picture is very clear right now. And I believe that the answer is an eventual large-scale violent conflict between the US, China, Russia, their respective allies and partners is extremely likely within the next 20 years or so. But the exact nature of this war, how it starts, how it plays out, and who comes out ahead is actually really unclear to me at least. So in this video, I wanted to try and figure it out. We're going to start with where I think it will eventually happen, which is the Taiwan Strait. China's invasion of Taiwan is essentially seen as inevitable by almost everyone that I know who follows geopolitics closely. It seems obvious that China won't stand for an independent Taiwan forever. We just don't know when the invasion will happen. The question being asked by analysts everywhere is when China decides to go for it. Some think it'll be sooner rather than later. Others say China is growing tired of the status quo and will wait until after the 2024 election. Those are the two leading theories. Either way, the impact will be immediate and far-reaching. There will be major casualties and disruption to trade routes around the area. The Japanese and South Korean economies will be hurt badly. The stock market will probably crash globally, and investors will immediately flee to safety. Gold, real estate, doomsday bunkers, etc. The interesting thing here is what happens after that. Does the rest of the world just sit back and watch while the US gets bogged down in another protracted foreign conflict? Or does something else happen? If I had to guess, I think that Russia would see this as an opportunity to escalate their own ongoing conflict with Ukraine. If the US focuses too much on Taiwan, Russia knows they will have the freedom to do whatever they want in Ukraine. They may decide to mobilize a few 100,000 additional troops, they may use chemical weapons, or they may even resort to tactical nuclear strikes against key positions held by Ukrainian forces. This is all speculation, of course, but it's my belief that Putin is planning to ramp up the conflict in Ukraine regardless of what happens with Taiwan. He thinks he has Western Europe by the balls because of the Nord Stream pipeline explosions, and he believes that he can threaten the rest of the continent with tactical nuclear strikes. I think this is a serious threat that shouldn't be taken lightly. In terms of how the U.S. responds to Chinese aggression in the Pacific, I'm not sure exactly what they would do. The assumption is that the United States would throw everything they've got at the problem. But the U.S. military is already spread very thin across the world. They are committed to defending Taiwan. They are currently bogged down in Afghanistan, Iraq, and Syria. They have tensions along the southern border, and they have to worry about Russian escalation in Ukraine. There is no chance the U.S. would send ground troops into Taiwan. It's simply not feasible. The only options they have are to support Taiwan with arms, ammunition, funding, and most importantly, intelligence. The U.S. will need to give Taiwanese forces every advantage possible to help them win the fight against China, so things get bad quick. Then it would be up to the U.S. and her allies to respond to China with sanctions, perhaps blockading China from trading with the rest of the world, cutting them off from international banking and targeting their industries. Maybe there could be some sort of diplomatic solution here, but I doubt it. China is hell-bent on reunification, and I don't see Xi Jinping backing down to save face. Now, it could be the case that China makes the mistake of invading too quickly, in which case the U.S. could rally the rest of the world to her cause and form some kind of united front against them. But I think in this case, the sanctions wouldn't hurt China too badly. China doesn't rely on international trade the same way that Russia does. They are much less connected to the international monetary system, and they're also less dependent on importing goods. The sanction strategy used against Russia hasn't worked particularly well, and I doubt it would work against China. Instead, the economic pressure would most likely be focused on pressuring China to stop the fighting and find a diplomatic solution. But again, I don't think that will work either. China's economy will slow down and the Chinese people will feel the pinch, but they won't be able to stop the war. And then somewhere in the middle of this chaos, Iran jumps into action. They fire missiles at Israel, and that causes the entire Middle East to blow up. That may sound weird, but it's actually a pretty realistic possibility. The war between Israel and Iran has been building for decades. Things will eventually come to a head, and when that happens, Iran will undoubtedly attack Israel. Whether that happens during the Taiwan conflict or not isn't super important. The point is that Iran will open another front for the U.S. military to deal with. It's unclear exactly how the U.S. would react to this. It depends largely on how much damage Iran has done. If Iran is able to destroy many Israeli cities and inflict heavy casualties on Israel, then the U.S. will most likely intervene directly. Perhaps they'll impose a blockade on Iranian ports, severing Iran from international trade. Or maybe they'll begin carpet-bombing Iranian air bases and missile silos. At this point, the only countries that the U.S. is absolutely committed to defend are Israel and Japan. Defending Taiwan from China is definitely a priority, but it's not the same as defending Israel from Iran or Japan from North Korea. Now, in a best-case scenario, the fighting is limited to the Middle East, and the U.S. is able to broker a ceasefire between Iran and Israel. But I think that's highly unlikely. The fighting will continue for weeks, months, or even years. Who knows? And it's likely that Saudi Arabia and other Sunni Muslim nations will jump into the fray. The war in the Middle East will develop its own momentum independent of the situation in Taiwan. Oil wells will be burned. Refineries will be bombed, and there will be serious food shortages across the region and the rest of the world due to the closure of shipping lanes in the Red Sea and the Suez Canal. It'll be ugly and messy, and it will likely end with the United States occupying several strategic locations in the Middle East. But the final piece of this puzzle is the hidden front, the one that will cause the most destruction and death, and that is the war in cyberspace. The fighting in the Middle East and the Pacific will be accompanied by a struggle to dominate the airwaves. Drones will be flying overhead day and night, carrying out surgical strikes. Planes will be shot down and anti-ship missiles will be fired. Traditional warfare will be happening in plain sight, but most of the damage will be caused by cyber warfare and artificial intelligence. It's a good bet that the U.S., China, Russia, and Iran all have automated drone systems that can fly into airspace and carry out attacks without direct human input. It's also a safe bet that they all have offensive cyber capabilities that can take out enemy infrastructure and communication networks. But what's scary is the unintended consequences. I think that a rogue algorithm or a series of computer viruses could easily take out infrastructure that wasn't directly targeted. Power grids could fail, water treatment plants could malfunction, and hospitals could lose access to patient records. The internet itself could come under attack, and that would cut off access to basic information and communications. The scary part is that once it starts, we won't be able to stop it. It'll be a non-linear war where anyone anywhere could be attacked at any time. Everyone will be living in fear. At some point, a miscalculation will occur. A hacker will fire a virus that spreads too far. A drone will enter restricted airspace. A radar system will lock onto the wrong plane. The result will be disastrous, and the response will be swift and brutal. I'm not sure what the actual trigger will be, but I'm pretty confident that it will involve Russia feeling desperate and lashing out. They may fire a nuke at Japan or Taiwan, not necessarily as a first strike weapon, but as a message to NATO that if they keep sending aid to Ukraine, there will be consequences. Russia's thinking is that the U.S. won't risk direct military engagement with the use of tactical nuclear weapons, but if they are able to hit Tokyo or Osaka, then the public will force the U.S. government to intervene, and that would mean a direct confrontation between nuclear powers. Now, in the immediate aftermath of such a strike, the U.S. would probably respond with conventional weapons, perhaps taking out Russian air bases and launching special forces missions behind enemy lines. But inevitably, there would be further escalations. Things would spiral out of control, and soon enough, the world would be engulfed in flames. There would be a lot of back and forth. There would be multiple strikes and counterstrikes, but there would be no true victor. Billions of people would die. The world would be plunged into darkness, and humanity would be set back centuries. It would be horrible. But here's the good news. This scenario is not inevitable. As horrible as it sounds, this war is not going to happen unless we let it. Most of us think of World War III as a giant battle between good and evil. In reality, it would be a tragedy. All sides would suffer. It would be pointless. It would be needless. So don't fall for those YouTube channels that are constantly trying to hype everyone up. The truth is that the path to World War III is paved with complacency, apathy, and indifference. The future is unwritten. If we commit ourselves to making the world a better place, then we can prevent World War III from ever happening.